My name is Delia Whitcomb. I'm 59 years old, and 46 years ago my father pulled off Highway 63 at a truck stop 92 miles from our house, told me to get out and stretch my legs, and then drove away with my mother and my brother still inside the car. I was 13. I slept that night on a stack of flattened cardboard behind the ice machine, wearing my brother's letterman jacket, counting headlights, and waiting for one pair to swing back around. None of them did. I never lived under my parents' roof again. No phone calls, no birthdays. 46 years of nothing but weather. And then this past spring, an envelope came to my mailbox in Springfield. Heavy cream paper, gold lettering, an invitation to my parents' 60th wedding anniversary, and folded behind the reply card a single line in my mother's handwriting that made me sit down on my own kitchen floor. But here is what nobody in that family knew when they licked that envelope shut. What a stranger in a red apron would tell me 11 days before the party. And what I would do when my father stood up in front of 250 people, raised a plastic cup of punch, and forgave me. That town has not stopped talking about it since. If you like stories where the quiet one finally gets to speak, stay with me, because this one takes a turn about halfway through that I still can't tell without stopping to breathe. Let me take you back to where it started. The day the envelope came, I'd worked 11 hours. I'm a hospice nurse, have been for 26 years. I sit with people in the last rooms of their lives, and I hold their hands, and I answer the same question over and over. Not the one you'd think. They almost never ask me if it's going to hurt. What they ask me is, am I being a bother? 88 years old, a man who fought in Korea and raised 5 children and never missed a shift at the plant, looking up at me from a rented bed in his daughter's dining room, asking if he's putting anybody out. And every single time, I lean down close, and I say the same sentence. You are not a burden. Not for 1 minute. Not ever. I have said that sentence maybe 10,000 times, and every single time, some small part of me is saying it to a 13-year-old girl standing under a light pole on Highway 63. That evening I came home, dropped my keys in the dish by the door, and smelled onions and butter. Emmett was at the stove with his sleeves rolled. He taught shop and drafting at the high school for 31 years, and he cooks like a man building something. Level, measured twice. He nodded at the counter. Mail's there. Something fancy came for you. The envelope was sitting on top of the electric bill, like it had bought the place. Thick cream paper, my name in gold calligraphy, the kind you pay extra for, and in the corner, a postmark I hadn't seen since the last of Graham's estate papers cleared. Ransom Creek, Missouri. I stood in my own kitchen, in the life I built out of absolutely nothing, and I held that envelope the way you hold something that might go off in your hand. Emmett turned the burner down. Delia, who's it from? I already knew. Some part of me had been waiting 46 years for it. The invitation itself was lovely. I'll give them that. Gold border, 2 doves. Together with their family, Vernon and Coralie Whitcomb request your presence in celebration of 60 years of marriage. Saturday, June the 13th. Fellowship Hall, Ransom Creek Baptist, supper and program to follow. 60 years, and down at the bottom, in smaller print, hosted by their son, Wendell Whitcomb, and family. My brother, 63 years old now, the boy who threw a jacket out a car window. And then, as I turned the card over, something slid loose and fell to the floor. A scrap of lined notebook paper, folded in quarters, tucked in behind the reply card like a stowaway. I unfolded it, my mother's slanted hand, the same handwriting that used to sign my permission slip. All is forgiven, Delia. Come home, Mother and Daddy. I laughed. One short, ugly laugh, the kind that gets out before you can vote on it, and then my hand started shaking and wouldn't quit. Emmett read it over my shoulder, and I watched him do the arithmetic on my face. All is forgiven, he said slowly. Delia, what in the world do they think they're forgiving you for? That right there is the question. 46 years of silence. And the message my parents finally chose to send me was a pardon, not an apology, not even a question, a pardon, handed down by the 2 people who left a 7th grader at a truck stop and drove 92 miles home to sleep in their own bed. I smoothed that paper flat on the counter, and I heard my own voice come out level and strange. To explain that, I said, I have to start at the beginning. So that's what I'll do for you now. Ransom Creek, Missouri. is the kind of town where the church bulletin is the newspaper. Everybody knows everybody's business, which is exactly why everybody works so hard to make sure there isn't any business to know. We lived on Sycamore Street in a white house with a green roof in the best-kept yard on the block. My father, Vernon Whitcomb, ran the loading floor at the Ransom Creek grain elevator and spent his Saturdays under other men's trucks for pocket money. He was a deacon. Men shook his hand slow, the way you do with somebody whose opinion costs something. My mother, Coralie, ran the ladies' circle and could stretch a pot roast like a miracle in the Gospels. My brother Wendell was 17, and he was the whole town's heart that year. Point guard, ball handler. Grown men in feed caps talked about that boy like poets talk about the ocean. And then there was me, 13, glasses, a library card gone soft at the corners, the one who asked questions. Why does the offering plate go to the roof fund when the Duttons don't have running water? Why does Mrs. Prather hug Mama on Sunday and talk ugly about her at the beauty shop on Thursday? My mother had one answer for all of it, delivered across the supper table with a look that could press a shirt. We don't air family business. That was the first commandment on Sycamore Street, not lying, but telling. You could be broke, you could be furious, you could be coming apart at every seam, and it was all just fine as long as the porch stayed painted. Our house was the best-looking house on that street. It was also the quietest one. It took me 30 years to understand those two facts were related. The winter I turned 13, the elevator cut back to 2 days a week, and my father's hours went with it. I know now that something broke in him that year. Back then, all I knew was what I could see. He still got up at 5, still put on the same coveralls, still carried the same black lunch pail, still backed the car out at the same minute every morning. Where he went all day, I couldn't tell you. My mother's mouth got thinner. She started catching the phone on the first ring like she was racing somebody to it. And one night in February, I came down for a glass of water and stopped on the third stair, because my parents were at the kitchen table with the shoebox full of envelopes, and my father was talking in a kind of quiet I had never heard out of him. The car payment was 2 months behind. That car, a brand new 1979 Oldsmobile, deep green, bought 6 weeks before the hours got cut, parked out front like a trophy. The bank had called twice that week. My mother said the words co-signer and Pastor Lyle, and my father brought his hand down on that table so hard the sugar bowl jumped. Sunday morning we sat in the fourth pew like always. My father put the tidy envelope in the plate with a motion smooth as a card trick, and I watched my mother laugh at something Mrs. Prather said, bright and easy, like a woman with no shoebox at all. In the car I asked her, honestly asking, why it was all right to pretend at church, when church was where they taught you not to pretend. She looked at me in the mirror a long second. That's not pretending, Delia Ann. That's dignity. 6 weeks later, the truth fell out of my mouth in a parking lot full of people, and it cost me the rest of my childhood. The regional tournament was in Columbia, 92 miles from our driveway. We made the drive in the green Oldsmobile, my father's hands at 10 and 2. My mother reading the road map out loud, even though there was only the one highway. Wendell played like the town needed him too. 26 points, 2 steals in the last minute. I can still see him out there, 17 years old and certain, the whole world shaped like a scoreboard. The Ransom Creek families filled 4 rows behind the bench, and when that final buzzer went, they came up out of those seats roaring. Afterward, in the parking lot, Mrs. Prather clapped her hands together and announced the team was going to celebrate at a steakhouse out by the interstate. Her treat for the coaches. Everybody else was coming too, no excuses, and she looked right at my mother when she said it. My mother looked at my father. And I, 13 years old, hungry, proud of my brother, raised to answer an adult when an adult spoke to me, filled that little silence with the plain truth. Daddy says we can't do restaurants till the car's caught up. That's it, that's the whole crime. The quiet that came after had a texture to it, like the air curdled. Mrs. Prather's smile went to plastic. Somebody's father studied his boots. My mother made a sound like a laugh with the bones taken out of it, said something about all of us watching our waistlines, and steered me toward the car with her fingernails in my shoulder. My father didn't say a word. He shook the coach's hand. He hollered congratulations at Wendell loud enough for the crowd to hear. Then he got behind the wheel, and we pulled out of that lot before they'd even handed out the trophy. The drive home was 92 miles. I only made it 34 of them. Nobody spoke for the better part of an hour. Wendell sat beside me in the back in his warm-ups, turning the game ball over and over in his hands. My mother watched the fields go by. My father watched the road. And I watched the back of his neck, which in our family was its own kind of weather report. Just past dark, he put on his signal and pulled into a Sinclair truck stop on Highway 63 outside of Clark. There was a cafe attached to it with a wagon wheel on the sign. 92 miles behind us, 58 left to home. I know those numbers now, the way other people know their own birthday. He parked out past the diesel pumps and told me to get out and stretch my leg. I thought it was a bathroom stop. I remember being relieved, if you can believe it. I stood out on that concrete under the white lights, and I heard the driver's door shut, and the car rolled forward maybe 10 feet, and my father's window came down halfway. He looked at me the way he looked at an engine that had disappointed him. "You want to talk like a grown woman in front of people?" His voice was calm. That's the part that still gets me. How calm it was. "Then be one. Find your own way home." The window went up. The gravel popped under the tires. I remember thinking, clear as arithmetic, he's going to turn around at the road. He did not turn around at the road. Through the back glass I saw Wendell lunge. I saw his palm hit that window one time. I saw my mother's face float up in the side mirror, white as a communion cloth. And then the back window jerked down and something dark came flying out and landed on the shoulder of the road in a heap. The taillights got small, then they were gone. The thing on the shoulder was my brother's letterman jacket. Cream sleeves, green wool, still warm from him. Whitcomb stitched across the back. I picked it up out of the gravel and I put it on and it hung down past my knees. I stood under those lights wearing my own last name, waiting on a car that was not coming back. Now, here is what a 13-year-old girl does at a truck stop at night, 58 miles from home, with no coat of her own and 60 cents in her pocket. First, she waits, because they're coming back. Everybody comes back. Then the sky goes all the way dark, and she gets practical, because she is her father's daughter whether the man wants her or not. There was a payphone bolted to the block wall between the restrooms. I knew exactly one telephone number by heart, ours. I dialed 0 and asked the operator for a collect call, and my voice only broke on the last digit. I could hear the operator's gums snapping while it rang, twice, 3 times, and then my father's voice, close and impossible, saying hello. The operator asked, would he accept a collect call from Delia? And my father said, no, she's got a lesson to learn. Then a click, then that flat dead dial tone. And I want you to know I stood there, holding that receiver against my ear for a long, long time, like it might change its mind. I didn't try to flag down a truck. 13-year-old girls who climb into strangers' cabs at night turn into a different kind of story. And even then, even that night, I knew it. Instead, I walked the building twice like a little inspector, and I found the place my body still remembers, the gap between the ice machine and the block wall on the east side, out of the wind. Clean line of sight to the pumps. I sat down on a flattened box in my brother's jacket with my knees pulled up inside it, and I counted semis to stay awake. 62 of them. Every set of headlights that slowed, my chest would come up off the ground, and then the rig would fuel and pull out, and I'd start counting over. At 5:45 in the morning, a woman in a red apron came around the side with 2 bags of trash and dropped them both. Her name tag said Ruby. She brought me a grilled cheese off the flat top and a cold bottle of orange pop, and she sat down on an overturned milk crate beside me while she waited on the sheriff. By noon that day, my parents had given that sheriff their version. And by Christmas, their version was the only one Ransom Creek had ever heard. My parents' version went like this. We stopped for fuel. Delia Ann was sulking over a talking to. She wandered off toward the restrooms, and when we circled back for her, she was nowhere to be found. So naturally, we assumed she caught a ride to her grandmother's, the way she was always threatening to. A misunderstanding, a dramatic girl, a tired family, a dark highway. The deputy who drove me to the substation bought me a candy bar and believed every word of it, because Vernon Whitcomb was a deacon who had rebuilt that man's transmission for the cost of the parts. But a caseworker from the state opened a file anyway. Her name was Mrs. Estelle Boyd, and she was the first adult in my life who wrote down what I said with her whole face holding still. And my grandmother, my mother's mother, Odessa Fairbanks Graham to me, drove down from Hannibal that same afternoon. 71 years old, doing 80 in a Chrysler, a thunderstorm in a knit hat. She took one look at me sitting in that station in a borrowed blanket, and something in her face closed like a ledger book. The rest happened quietly, the way my family preferred everything. A safety plan first. Then, that fall, legal guardianship through the county probate court. No trial, no headline in the Ransom Creek Sentinel, no scene at the church potluck. The caseworker recommended it, Graham petitioned for it, and my parents. This is the part that took me most of my life to say out loud. My parents signed. They sat in a lawyer's office on a Tuesday morning and signed their 13-year-old daughter over like a title to a truck, because fighting it meant an investigation, and an investigation meant the town would hear things. Here's what I remember most about that room. My mother cried at that table, but my father let out a long breath and his shoulders came down. I have watched relief cross 1,000 faces in 26 years of hospice. I know it when I see it. That man was relieved. Graham's house in Hannibal smelled like coffee and lemon oil, and the rules there were different. She laid them out my first night over grilled cheese. Grilled cheese again, and I have never once thought that was an accident, and the voice of a woman who had buried a husband and 2 brothers and did not scare easy. The truth is not a sin in this kitchen. You will never be sent anywhere for saying it, and nobody leaves this table hungry or unheard. Then she slid me the pickle jar. That was the whole orientation. I'll be honest with you. I was not an easy child to raise after that. I checked the door locks twice every night. I kept a packed suitcase in my closet until I was 16 years old, and Graham never once made me unpack it. She'd just quietly wash whatever was in it and fold it back in. But that kitchen table held. I graduated 3rd in my class. I put myself through nursing school on a scholarship and a supper shift at the Mark Twain Diner. And the day I pinned on my cap, Graham sat in the front row and whistled through her fingers like it was a ball game. 46 years. That woman was my entire family, her, and eventually Emmett. She died 4 years ago at 97, in her sleep, with her reading glasses still sitting on top of a half-finished crossword. At the funeral, I stood on one side of the aisle, and my parents stood on the other, and we did not speak. 46 years of practice makes perfect. My mother wept in waves, timed to the room. My father stood like a fence post in a good suit. Wendell hugged me by the coat rack for one awkward, aching minute. And I still carry the note Graham put in my lunch sack the first week of 8th grade, folded up in my wallet. It says, "Chin up. Tell the truth. Come home." The night that invitation came, I never went to bed. Emmett found me at 2 in the morning at the kitchen table with that note flattened out in front of me, my thumbnail going back and forth across my mother's cursive like I could sand it off the page. He sat down across from me and waited. He's good at that. Teachers and nurses, we both know what a pause is worth. I gave him the shape of it that night, only the shape. "Truck stop," I said. I was 13. They drove off. My grandmother took me in, and I never went back. All of it true, and all of it sanded smooth, corners knocked off, the ice machine left out, the payphone left out, every part that still had a splinter in it left out. 34 years married, and the man got the porch paint version. And I could hear myself doing it, and I could not stop. "I handle things," I told him, when he asked why I'd never even told him that much. "That's what I do. I handle things." He looked at me for a while. Then he said, "Delia, out of everybody I've ever known, you are the very best at being all right." He did not mean it as a compliment. He meant it the way you'd point at a scar. I sat with that until the furnace kicked on. And I still could not explain, not to him, not to myself, how a woman who can walk a family through the worst night of their lives had never once, in 46 years, told the story of hers. If you have ever sat at a kitchen table at 2 in the morning, holding a letter you didn't know how to answer, tell me in the comments what you did. I read every one of them. And stay with me. Because 4 days later my brother called, and what he said to me changed everything I thought I knew. I picked up because I was between visits, and I figured it was the pharmacy. There was a pause, and then a voice that had gotten deeper but had never really changed. "Hey, Dee, it's me." The last real conversation I'd had with my brother. He was 17 years old. He talked fast, the way people do when they've rehearsed. He knew the invitation was a lot. He'd wanted to call for years, and it never felt like his place, and he was sorry. And then he quit apologizing and got to it. They're going to be gone before long, Dee, both of them. And I want my sister in that room. Whatever else is true, I want you there. And I was doing all right, honestly, right up until he tried to comfort me. He said he understood if I didn't want to come. He said, and I could hear how gently he meant it. I know things were rough back then. Everybody said you were having a hard time. Mama always told us you refused to come home. That Graham let you make that call, and it about killed her. I stood there in my car in a driveway in Ozark, Missouri, with the phone against my ear, and something landed on me like a bucket of well water. My silence had not been neutral. For 46 years I said nothing, and their story went right on growing in that empty field. It was in the church directory, it was in the beauty shop, it was in my own brother's mouth. He wasn't lying to me. He was repeating what he'd been fed his entire adult life. "Wendell," I said carefully, "did you know they put a note in my invitation?" The line went quiet. He hadn't. I read it to him. "All is forgiven, Delia. Come home." He didn't say anything for so long. I checked the screen to see if the call had dropped. When he finally spoke, he sounded 17 again. "That's Mama's hand." "Hers," I said, "signed for both of them." And then I asked him the question I had never once asked another living Whitcomb. "Wendell, what do you remember about the Sinclair station?" I listened to my brother breathe. "I remember Daddy saying we'd circle back," he said slowly. "He said you needed a scare. 15 minutes, he said, and then we were just driving. And Mama kept saying you were probably hiding on purpose to punish us, that somebody'd call the house, that you always landed on your feet." Each sentence came out slower than the one before it, like a man going down a dark staircase, testing every step before he put his weight on it. "You were 13, he said at last, more to himself than to me. I was 17. I had a license, Dee. I could have—" He stopped. I didn't finish it for him. That's another thing this work has taught me. People have to diagnose themselves before they'll accept treatment. I told him I'd think about the party, and I meant it. But after we hung up, I sat in that driveway a long while, because I couldn't answer him yet. There was somewhere I had to stand first. Call it a debt or a test. 81 miles up the highway, there was a truck stop waiting on me, and I had been avoiding that stretch of 63 for 46 years. That Saturday, I drove north with the radio off. The Sinclair is a Casey's now. New canopy, new pumps, but the same building underneath, like a bone under new skin. The cafe is still attached, same wagon wheel on the sign, repainted about 11 times. I parked exactly where the green Oldsmobile had idled, and I made myself get out. The payphone is gone. There are 4 bolt holes in that block wall where it used to hang, and I stood there and put my finger in one of them, which is not something I can explain to you, only something I had to do. Then I walked around to the east side. The ice machine is newer, but it sits in the exact same corner, out of the wind, with the same clean view of the pumps, and the gap behind it is still about the width of a skinny kid. I stood in that gap in my good coat, 40 feet from where my father said, "Find your own way home," and I did not come apart, which, frankly, surprised me. Then I went inside and I bought a grilled cheese and a bottle of orange pop, and I ate standing at the window, looking out at that lot like a security guard reviewing old footage. The woman working the cafe side was in her 80s. Silver braid down her back, red apron. She reined me up, and then she reined me up a second time, and then her eyes narrowed and went wide. "Orange pop," she said. "Grilled cheese, no tomato." Ruby Teague, still there 3 mornings a week, 51 years at that counter. My throat closed like a fist. And it was standing right there in that building at that counter that I took out my phone and I sent my brother one line, "I'll come." Because if they left me at that truck stop, then that truck stop is exactly where I decide to come back from, on my own 2 feet, on my own terms. Ruby watched me hit send. Then she poured 2 cups of coffee without asking, sat down across from me in the booth by the window, and said the thing that rearranged everything I thought I knew about that night. "I always did wonder," Ruby said, "if anybody ever told you about the car." I set my coffee down. "What car?" "The night you was out there. I come on at 6 and found you." But Delbert worked the overnight, and he told the sheriff same as he told me. Somewheres around 2 in the morning, a car come through slow, didn't fuel, didn't park, just rolled the whole length of that lot past the pumps real slow, and then got right back on the highway, headed north. She turned her cup in a circle, watching me. Delbert only remembered it on account of how slow it went. Said it was like they was hunting something. I heard my own voice ask if Delbert had said anything else. One thing, Ruby's jaw set. Woman in the passenger seat, looking hard out that window. He raised a hand at him. You know, like you do out here. Nobody waved back. I sat very still in that booth doing arithmetic I did not want to do. Green car, Ruby said. Big one. North is toward Ransom Creek. 2 in the morning, 6 hours after the gravel popped, 4 hours after the collect call was refused. For 46 years, the story I had survived on was that they never came back, that they hit the garage door in Ransom Creek and never thought about it twice. It turns out that was the merciful version. Somebody drove that car 92 miles back down that highway in the middle of the night. Somebody rolled through that lot at walking speed while I slept 20 feet away behind an ice machine, below the light line, exactly as invisible as I had made myself, and then they pulled back out onto 63 and went home without ever opening a door. Who was driving, and why in God's name didn't they stop? I carried those 2 questions all the way to an anniversary party. I got home after dark, and Emmett took one look at my face and turned off the ball game. And this time I told him all of it. The bleachers in Columbia, Mrs. Prather's smile, the half-open window, the jacket in a heap on the shoulder of the road, the payphone and the gum-snapping operator and my father's voice saying she's got a lesson to learn, the click, the dial tone, the gap behind the ice machine and the 62 semis and the cardboard that held my body heat better than my family ever had. And then the new piece, still sharp from the box, a green car at 2 in the morning, rolling slow, and a woman's face at the passenger glass. Emmett listened the way I'd want to be listened to. He didn't flinch and he didn't perform. When I finished, he got up, poured 2 glasses of water, set one in front of me like a nurse would, and asked exactly one question. What do you want out of that room, Delia? Not are you okay? Not do you want me to hate them for you, which is what most people are really asking when they say I'm so sorry. What did I want? I opened my laptop instead of answering, because that is who I am. And I typed out a toast. 2 paragraphs, kind, beige, bulletproof. 60 years is a remarkable thing. Family is complicated. Love endures. Please raise your glasses. I saved a file as anniversary and read it out loud, and it tasted like the airplane version of a meal. Emmett read it over my shoulder. It's nice, he said, in the tone he used for shop projects that were technically finished. I'd printed it anyway. And I want you to understand something. I fully intended to read that version, right up until the last possible second. My mother called on a Thursday. Wendell had given her my number, and he agonized over it, he told me later. I answered standing at my kitchen window and heard her voice live for the first time in 46 years. It was smaller than I remembered, and sweeter, like syrup down at the bottom of the jar. She said my whole name, Delia Ann, the way she used to call me in from the yard. She said the fellowship hall was going to be just beautiful, that the ladies were doing a photograph table, and had I been getting her Christmas cards all these years, she'd never been sure about the address. And then, with the smallest little laugh, she got to the point. I do hope we can keep it pleasant, sweetheart. You were always so dramatic about the past. Let's not relitigate ancient history at your daddy's celebration. I watched a cardinal land on the fence and asked her evenly what she thought I might relitigate. The paws had lace on it. Nothing, honey. It's only... The Prathers are hosting the photograph table, and the pastor's doing a whole tribute. And people have asked about you. Our daughter, the nurse. They're just so pleased the whole family will be together. And there it was, laid out plain as a place setting. People had asked about the missing daughter. A gap in a family photograph raises questions, and questions are the one thing that Porch was built to prevent. I was not being welcomed home. I was being cast. A supporting role in a production called The Whitcombs are whole. One night only. Sunday clothes required. I'll see you in June, Mama, I said. She let out a satisfied little breath. And before she hung up, she said it. The old commandment, warm as a quilt and twice as smothering. We don't air family business, honey. I almost canceled twice. The Sunday before, I drove to Hannibal instead, to the cemetery where Graham is buried under a stone that says Fairbanks and, at her written instruction, nothing else. The dates, she said, are nobody's business. I sat down on that grass and told her every bit of it, the invitation, the note, the green car at 2 a.m, because some conversations don't stop just because one party has died. Then I let myself into her house, which is half packed into boxes now, and I opened the cedar chest in the back bedroom looking for her good tablecloth. It was there, but it was lying on top of something else. A sealed storage bag, labeled in Graham's block capitals. Delia, 13, keep. Inside was Wendell's letterman jacket. She had washed it. I remember it going into her machine that first week, and then apparently she had kept it for 46 years, folded like a flag, cream sleeves, cream wool, Whitcomb across the back. It still fits over a coat. That's the thing. I sat down on the floor of my dead grandmother's bedroom in my brother's jacket, and I finally understood why she'd kept it. It was the only thing that came out of that car for me. One person in that family, 17 years old and outvoted, had thrown me his own warmth on the way out the door. Evidence, Graham would have called it. She kept the evidence that one of them had loved me, even clumsily, even out a window at 50 miles an hour. I drove home with it riding shotgun. If somebody in your family ever rewrote a story that you pay for, type the word mine in the comments. I'll see it. And stay with me because the next stop is Ransom Creek, and the night before that party is where their whole picture started to crack. Ransom Creek, 4 to 6 years later, is a town wearing the same outfit, same banner over Main Street about the ball team, same marquee out front of the Baptist church, which that week read, Love beareth all things. We drove in Friday afternoon with Emmett's hand over mine on the console, and I made myself roll down Sycamore Street exactly once, at a respectful 25 miles an hour. White house, green roof, porch freshly painted. I did not slow down. That evening there was a family supper at the fellowship hall to set up for Saturday, and my mother saw me the second I came through the door. I watched it happen on her face, the freeze, the recalculation, and then the performance rising in her like water in a glass. Delia Ann, arms wide, voice pitched to Carrie, Ardelia, the nurse. She crossed that entire hall to hug me, and I stood in it like a coat rack, counting the faces watching us over her shoulder, which was, of course, the point of the hug. 46 years. And my first embrace from my mother came with an audience and overhead lighting. My father came along behind her at a deacon's pace. Up close he was smaller, grayer, still pressed and combed like a man expecting an inspection. He did not hug me. He put out his hand. I shook it, and it was exactly like closing on a used car. Good you came, he said. That was the entire speech. My mother's eyes were already wet, and I noticed, you learn to chart these things, that the tears arrived precisely as Mrs. Prather drifted into range. Supper was long tables and paper cloths, and my family's mythology performed live. I sat across from Wendell's wife, Charlene, who turned out to be easy to like, and their daughter, Bethany, 28, sharp-eyed, watching all of it. Somewhere between the ham and the sheet cake, Mrs. Prather asked, kindly, how it felt to have the whole family back together after all this time. My father folded his hands. Children scatter, he said in his pulpit voice. Roots hold, Whitcombs always find their way back. Warm murmurs all down the table. My mother picked it up like a duet they'd rehearsed. Delia went through a phase back then. Teenagers, you know how it is. A little tinkling laugh. She went and stayed with my mother a while up in Hannibal. But family's family, and here we all are. I want you to understand what it costs to sit still while your own erasure is served to a room as an appetizer. Phase, a while. My entire life after 13, folded down to the size of a napkin and tucked under a plate. Mrs. Prather reached over and squeezed my hand. We're all just so glad this family healed. And she meant it. That was somehow the worst part. I smiled and said the hall looked lovely, because my brother was watching me from down the table with his jaw set, and this was his parents' night, and I had promised myself I would not be the storm. I found my mother alone in the kitchen at the end of it, boxing leftover ham with the efficiency of a woman who has boxed 1,000 hams. I hadn't planned it. My feet just took me in there. I heard the door swing shut behind me, and I asked her the only question I had left. Did you come back that night? Her hand stopped. She did not ask me what night. 46 years of we don't discuss it, and she did not ask me which night I meant. That told me plenty all by itself. She set down the serving fork, and I watched her try on the usual outfits, the laugh, the honestly Delia, the ancient history, and not one of them fit in a closed kitchen with nobody watching. Finally her shoulders came down an inch, and my mother looked her age for the first time all evening. I made him turn that car around, she said quietly. Middle of the night. I couldn't sleep. I told him we were going back, and he drove, and we come through that lot around 2, and you weren't under the lights. She pressed the lid down until it clicked. I looked, Aaliyah. I looked hard. Her chin trembled and steadied. And your daddy said, he said, if she sees us come rescue her, the lesson dies. He said you'd found someplace warm, that the man at the counter had surely called somebody by now, that girls like you always land on their feet. She wouldn't look up, and we went home. I stood 20 feet from her, the same distance as an ice machine from a row of pumps, and I let the silence hold its own weight. Then she raised wet eyes to me and said the thing she must have truly believed was a gift. I wrote that note, sweetheart, the one in the invitation. Your daddy doesn't apologize. He never has. Not once in 60 years, not to anybody. All is forgiven, honey. That is the closest thing you are ever going to get. So there it was. I had come for an acknowledgement. There was none in stock. There never would be. My father was out in the parking lot by his truck. And because that night was apparently determined to empty every drawer in the house, he spoke to me. Your mother in there crying? I said she was fine. He nodded at the tailgate, which in our family means sit, and I didn't. He was quiet a while. You know what my daddy did to me, he said. Not a question. Summer I was 9. I did not know. He had never told me one story about himself in 13 years under his roof. Livestock barn at the county fair. I sassed him in front of the feed dealer, thought I was funny. He looked out at the road. He walked me to the end of the barn and told me to stand there and think about who paid for my boots. Then he left. Fair closed at 10. He come back at dark. He watched a moth go around the light. I stood by them pens all day, watched every man in this county walk past me, and I never sassed a soul in public again, not one time in 67 years. He said it the way you'd show somebody a trophy. And here is what I need you to sit with. His hands were shaking a little at the edges, the way hands do in my line of work when the body remembers what the mouth won't say. 9 years old, standing at the stock pens from noon till dark, scanning the crowd for one particular hat. He had been that boy. Nobody ever came back for that boy either. And he had spent his whole life polishing it into a parable. You turned out strong, my father said, straightening up. Strongest one in that hall, that come from me, Delia. You're welcome. He went back inside. And I stood in that gravel and let go, finally, completely, of the apology I had been quietly waiting on for 46 years. It was never coming. It had never even existed. Wendell knocked on my motel door at 10 that night, still in his good shirt, carrying 2 bottles of orange pop like we were kids sneaking provisions. He got 2 steps in and stopped, because the jacket was hanging over the chair. He touched the sleeve like it might not be real. You kept this? Graham kept it, I said. 46 years, in a cedar chest with my name on the bag. He sat down on the edge of the bed with a bottle in each hand and didn't open either one. And I made the decision I'd been circling for weeks. If my brother was going to stand up tomorrow and give a tribute to those 2 people in front of the whole county, he was going to do it knowing the entire thing. So I told him, all of it, in order, in the flat voice I used for a handoff report, because that voice is the only container strong enough. The window at half-mast, the collect call. Our father's voice saying she's got a lesson to learn. The gap behind the ice machine, the count of the semis. The green car at 2 in the morning, and whose face was at the passenger glass. Wendell got paler by the paragraph. And when I got to the payphone, he made a sound like he'd been hit. I heard it, he said. The phone. That night it rang one time late, and I come out on the stairs, and Daddy was standing in the dark kitchen holding it. I heard him say no, just no, And Mama hollered down who was it, and he said, "Wrong number, go back to bed." My brother put his face in his hands. 63 years old, shoulders going, and he said the truest thing anybody in my family has ever said to me. I told myself you were okay because Graham came. I needed you to be okay so I wouldn't have to know what I knew. Then he wiped his face and looked up and asked it. "Tomorrow, when it's my turn to speak, will you stand up and say something? As my family?" The party was, honestly, a lovely thing, and I need you to know that, because nothing that happened later was aimed at anybody who didn't earn it. 250 people in that fellowship hall. Photograph table, punch bowls, a slideshow with 60 years of Whitcombs in it, and not one single picture of me between the ages of 13 and 59. I sat at the family table with Emmett's hand in mine and my handbag on my knee, and inside that handbag was the safe toast, printed and folded. 2 beige paragraphs, standing by. After supper, the pastor said a few words. Then my father pushed back his chair, stood up, and tapped a plastic cup with a spoon. My father does not give speeches, he gives verdicts, slowly, and a hall full of people leaned forward to receive one. He thanked the church, he thanked the ladies' circle, he praised my mother for 60 years of a well-run home. He praised Wendell, the ball team, the business, the son a man builds his name on. And then my father turned, unhurried, and looked down the table at me. And I knew what was coming the way you know a storm by the color of the sky. Every family, he said, weathers something. Flo nods out there, in the dark part of the room. Our daughter Delia. 250 faces swung toward me on cue. Drifted from us a good while, went her own way. We won't dwell on old weather tonight. A pause, measured like lumber. Because tonight, with all of us under one roof, I can stand up here and say it plain. This family is whole, and all is forgiven. He raised his cup to a room he had just finished rearranging. To family. And that hall, the church, the neighbors, the whole county, came up out of their chairs and said it right back to him. Family. My mother dabbed her eyes on tempo, and I sat there with my hands in my lap, watching my father accept a standing room's admiration for publicly forgiving me, warmly, in front of the very people whose questions had gotten me invited in the first place, for the crime of having been left at a truck stop when I was 13 years old, and 2 seats down, my brother Wendell was not clapping. What happened next was not on anybody's program. Wendell stood up, buttoned his jacket, and put out his hand for the microphone. The sun, so the room hushed itself, expecting more of the same. He looked at our father for a second, then he looked past him, at me. "Before we cut the cake," Wendell said, "my sister drove a long way to be here tonight." His voice caught and steadied, "a whole lot longer than most of you know." He walked the length of that table and held the microphone out to me. "Dee, would you say a few words as my family?" There are moments a room can feel before it understands. The temperature drops. The meaning gets there ahead of the fact. My mother's hand closed around my wrist under the tablecloth, gently, a warning dressed up as affection. My father's jaw set into the same weather I'd watched from a back seat 46 years ago. 250 people smiled at me, expecting sweetness. And I sat there with the choice, the real one, the one I'd been carrying since March, finally out of the envelope and lying in my lap. In my handbag 2 beige paragraphs, and behind them everything I came from. A seat at the Christmas table, my mother's cards, a family on the one condition that the story stay theirs. And in my chest, 46 years. I looked at my brother holding out that microphone like a hand out of a car window. I slid my wrist out from under my mother's fingers, and I stood up. I took the microphone, and then I did the thing I still think about. I took the safe toast out of my handbag, and I folded it in half, and I set it down on the tablecloth in front of my father, where he could watch me not read it. "My name is Delia Whitcomb," I said, and my voice came out the way it comes out at 3 in the morning in somebody's dying room, level, unhurried, because somebody in the room has to be. Most of you have never met me. I understand I went through a phase. Soft, uncertain laughter. I let it die on its own. 46 years ago, my brother played the best basketball game of his life in Columbia, Missouri. On the drive home at the Sinclair station on Highway 63 outside of Clark, My father told me to get out of the car. Nobody was eating now. I was 13. I had embarrassed the family that afternoon. I told another mother out loud that we couldn't afford the team supper. And so my father looked at me under those lights and said, "You want to talk like a grown woman? Then be one. Find your own way home." You could hear the fans in the ceiling. And my family drove away. I called home collect from the payphone that night. The call was refused. I slept behind the ice machine on a flattened box in my brother's letterman jacket, which he threw out the window as they pulled off. It was the only warmth anybody in my family gave me that night, and I want him to know I still have it. I found Wendell's face. He was crying openly by then, and so was his daughter. In the morning, a stranger named Ruby Teague found me. She fed me a grilled cheese and a bottle of orange pop and called the sheriff. And my grandmother Odessa drove down from Hannibal that same afternoon and gave me a home, and a kitchen where the truth was never a sin. My parents signed the guardianship papers that fall, and they have, just now, forgiven me. I turned and looked at my father, who had gone the color of unpainted fence. "Daddy, I did what you told me. I grew up. I found my own way home. It's a little brick house in Springfield with a man who has never once left me anywhere." My mother was weeping into a napkin, and for the first time in my life I believed those tears and understood that they changed absolutely nothing. "You forgave me tonight in front of witnesses, so let me return the kindness. I forgive myself for spending 46 years believing I had to earn my way back into a family that drove away." I raised my cup, and I found the two faces at the center of that room, my brother and his daughter. Wendell, Bethany, may every child in this family grow up knowing that the truth is not a sin in their kitchen, and may not one of them ever have to be brave at a gas station. And I drank. Nobody in that hall was breathing. My father stood up so fast his folding chair went over backward, and the crack of it hitting that tile floor was the loudest sound of the night. "That is enough. We don't." And he stopped, right there, in the middle of the commandment, because some part of him heard where that sentence was going to end in front of 250 people. The room finished it for him in perfect silence. We don't air family business. You could watch it land on every face under those lights. Watch that whole hall, understand that the man was not denying one word I'd said. He was objecting to the telling. Mrs. Prather set her cup down on the table, slowly and deliberately, and did not pick it back up, and in that town, that is a verdict with a gavel behind it. And then my niece, Bethany, 28 years old, who had never in her life met me before that weekend, got up and crossed that floor in front of everybody and put her arms around me. "Thank you," she said into my ear. "I've known something was wrong my whole life, and nobody would ever say what." Wendell came next, wrapping us both, his tears on my shoulder in full view of the town that had watched him grow up golden. I set that microphone down on the table, next to the toast I never read. I kissed my niece on the cheek, and I walked out of that hall into the June air, spine straight, steps even, exactly the way you walk out of a room you are finally done auditioning for. My mother caught up to me out in the gravel between the parked trucks, her heels punching little holes in the ground, and her voice, when it came, had every ounce of syrup stripped out of it. "You have killed this family." She stood there under the parking lot light with her fists at her sides. 60 years of managed appearances coming apart at every seam. "Do you hear me, Delia Ann? 60 years I held this family together, and you walked in here and killed it in 5 minutes." I opened the car door, and I felt around inside myself for the anger. And here is the strange mercy of that night. It wasn't there. There was only clarity, cool and complete, like the moment a fever breaks. "No, Mama," I said. "This family died at a truck stop 46 years ago. I'm just the one who finally reported it." She stood there. Behind her, through the open doors, I could see the party putting itself back together the way rooms do. Somebody starting the music again, the caterers moving, Wendell's hand on his daughter's back. And in front of me, my mother's face did something I had never once seen it do. It ran out of versions. No performance came, nothing came at all. Emmett got in beside me, and we pulled out of that lot, down past the church, out onto the state highway heading south. Somewhere past Rolla I watched the trip odometer roll past 92 miles. And I said the number out loud to the dark windshield, because 92 miles was once the exact distance between me and every person who was supposed to love me. Emmett looked over. You all right? I checked, honestly, the way you'd check a pulse. Yes, I said. And for the first time in 46 years, it was not a performance. We didn't stop. I won't pretend the weeks after were tidy. Ransom Creek split like stove wood. An aunt I hadn't seen since the Carter administration left me a voicemail informing me that I had ruined a beautiful evening, humiliated two good people, and that Graham of all souls on this earth would be ashamed of me, which told me only that the woman had never once eaten at Graham's table. Two cousins texted the other thing. I believe you. One of them added quietly that people had always wondered why a 13-year-old girl suddenly went to live in Hannibal. My parents never called. There was no apology, no reckoning, no movie ending. What came instead, through the grapevine, was version 3. Delia's been troubled since she was a little girl. She got overwrought at the reception. We're praying for her. The porch repainting itself in real time. The old me would have argued with that, or ached over it. Instead, I noticed something one ordinary Tuesday in July. I was standing at my mailbox, and my stomach was quiet. 46 years of bracing every single time an envelope looked too formal, and the dread had simply packed up and left, because the thing I'd been bracing against had finally happened out loud in front of everybody, and I was still standing here. Bethany writes me now. Long letters, the paper kind, because she says texting doesn't hold enough. Wendell calls every Sunday evening at 7, regular as a pill. Some of those calls are easy. Some of them are my brother grieving the parents he thought he had, and I let him, because nobody ever let me. And one gray afternoon, a padded envelope came from Clark, Missouri. Inside was a postcard of a Sinclair station at sunset, the kind of postcard nobody on earth has ever wanted. On the back, no message, just the signature. Ruby, I send to a... It's framed in my kitchen now, next to the window where the light hits it at 6 in the morning. Thanksgiving was at our house. Wendell, Charlene, Bethany, Emmett, me. One slightly dry turkey and 0 performances. At one point, my brother opened my refrigerator hunting the cranberry sauce and went still, and then started laughing in that helpless, hiccuping way, because there on the top shelf, front and center, was a bottle of orange pop. He turned around, holding it up like evidence. Every week, I told him, grocery store, can't explain it, don't need to. He set it back gently, the way you handle a relic. The Letterman jacket lives folded on my bookshelf now, between the nursing manuals and Graham's crossword dictionaries. Cream sleeves, green wool, Whitcomb facing out. My name, too, after all. I paid enough for it. Near the end of that night, Bethany raised her glass and cleared her throat twice before it came out. When I have kids, she said, looking right at me, they're going to know their great-aunt first, before any other version of anything, and they're going to get the whole story in their own kitchen from me. Her father put his hand over hers, and under the table mine was steady, because here is what 46 years and 92 miles finally taught me. Home was never that white house with the green roof that I was ordered to find my own way back to. Home is the table where the truth gets to sit down and eat. My parents forced me to grow up that day. They did. And I never forgave them, not because I'm bitter, but because forgiveness is a door you open for somebody who's knocking. And in 46 years, neither one of them ever knocked. What I did instead was better. I stopped waiting at the door. That's my story. One truck stop, 46 years of silence, one handwritten line in an envelope, and one toast that family never saw coming. If somebody rewrote a story that you paid for, maybe it's time to take it back, gently, calmly, and out loud. Share this with somebody who needs to hear that. Tell me down in the comments what you would have said standing at that microphone. I read everyone, and I'll see you in the next story.